Ahoy, and welcome in to the most exciting episode of Not Allowed to Die, where I, Dan Magler, social worker and life enthusiast, answer your questions about mental health, dilemmas that I'm seeing in my private practice as a therapist and also as a school social worker. Alongside, as always, is Mariska, the three-tooth Patterdale Terrier. And the reason this is the most exciting episode ever, this is what you've all been waiting for, I have special guests. And today we are going to talk about partial hospitalization programs. So I have two partial hospitalization program veterans, and they're going to tell us a
Yes.
little bit about, how they work and whatnot. So if you have questions, and this is probably not going to be our guest's only appearance on the podcast, and I'm excited and terrified because I am not tech savvy. So I'm afraid that somehow this will not upload and you, the podcast listener, will not be able to hear the wisdom of my two guests. But don't worry, don't fret. We will have them on again because they are experts in a number of mental health areas. And so we already know that they'll be recurring. So if you have questions for me or for them, you can email me at daniel.magler@live.com. That's daniel.magler@live.com. Or if you have questions for Mariska. So she will try her best to answer. So without further ado, I would love for if each of you in turn could please introduce yourselves and how and why you became acquainted with partial hospitalization programs.
All right. Hi, friends. I'm Talia. Do I have to say anything else beside my name? Do you want me to?
You don't have to. Whatever you're comfortable with is what I want you to share with, so that's fine.
When was your first PHP?
Oh, it was 9 months ago.
Okay.
Maybe somewhere around there. Last November.
And you've done how many, so did you do 2 or 3 PHPs?
I did 1 PHP and 2 IOPs.
Okay. So hopefully we can get into a little bit of the difference between those and, what makes one better than the other or whatnot. All right.
And then I'm Natalie. I went to my first PHP in 7th grade, and that was a long time ago now, probably like 6 years. And then I went to, I think, like 2 others in between 7th grade and freshman year. And then the second time I got hospitalized, I we just decided I didn't need a PHP because like all the lessons it could teach me just no longer like applied because I knew them all. So any skill that was like new, I kind of already had the knowledge of and didn't really seem to get anything out of a PHP anymore. Okay. So I just went back to therapy.
So you had done inpatient hospitalization and so you've done the so when we talk about the range of mental health support, we've got, and you guys are also experts in, you've done the regular one-to-one private practice therapy. You've done, so then if we ramp that up, there's also group therapy, which you guys have definitely done. And then we move to IOP, which is intensive outpatient programming, which is often about like 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours a day, maybe 3 to 4 days a week. Then partial hospitalization program, which is usually about 8 hours in a day, 6 to 8 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week. Then the second highest level is inpatient programming, where you're spending the night there. And then finally residential, which in some ways residential programs, people may not realize, they tend to be a little bit less restrictive than the inpatient hospitalization, because when you're at a residential, it's just that this is a longer term issue that you're working on, but they may let you like wander around the grounds of a campus or whatnot. Whereas when you're in an inpatient setting, it is very much on lockdown. So can you guys start off with just taking through what's a day in the life of a partial hospitalization program like? And obviously for you guys, you were both students at the time, so it would be a little bit different for someone who's over the age of 18. But so tell me, like, you get there and what happens? What does it look like? And for at a PHP when you arrive.
You want to go first or me?
Whatever, you can go first.
Okay, so obviously it's different. Sorry, it's different with every program. But with mine, when I got there, it was like in the height of COVID times. So I got there, I had to change my mask, put hand sanitizer on, I got a key for my locker, I put all my goods in my locker. And then I had an individual room. So I would go like get set up in there. And then I would go to the group room and we would do check-in, which they had me like fill out this little sheet. And then
Oh, the check-in sheet.
I
forgot
know
about
the
that.
check-in sheets. And then the program I was at was pretty like individualized. So it was mostly exposure therapy with like we did art therapy some days. We had a nursing group where the nurse that worked there would come in and like talk about healthy lifestyle stuff. But most of my day would be spent doing exposures and recording those. And then we had a little bit of time to do schoolwork where we did it in the group room with a like teacher type person.
They're not teachers though.
They're
Like
not
they're the
teachers.
worst. Like I'm sorry.
They
but
usually like don't know that much, but like they know enough and they're usually really nice.
they're usually really nice, but like if you're anywhere higher than algebra, like there's nothing they can really help you with.
But I loved mine. She was the sweetest.
And for me, I always had 2. So
Really?
that's yeah.
Oh,
Because there was just always so many people. So
well, I was at a small program. They only had 8 spots.
Oh dang.
Yeah.
So you're getting there, you do your little check-in sheet to say basically how the night before went, how you're feeling, what the major issues are. You're doing some about maybe an hour to 90 minutes of schoolwork so that so you're not getting too far behind. And then it's just what generally hour-long groups for the most part throughout the day, or like 40-minute groups.
Say it's like 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I had like 1 or 2 groups a day, and then the rest I would just spend doing exposures and checking in with my individual therapist.
Okay. I will say there's always like a concrete schedule, and at least in my experience, like it would always be like written on the board, like 8:15, 8:30 check-in, 8:30 to 9, like group therapy, which is basically like I felt like in PHP, group therapy is basically just like a check-in kind of thing where it's like if I need to talk, I'm going to talk. I rate it 1 through 10, 1 being really bad, 10 being really good, like how like badly I need to rate it. I like speak about it, I guess. And then you kind of just go around and give advice.
Yeah, and it's basically just like a process group.
Yeah, and then I feel like the like activities definitely range.
Yeah. But
so a process group though would be where a person's just talking about their feelings and what they're experiencing and getting feedback from the rest of the group on whatever they're feeling in that moment and using some of the skills. And then like a skills group would be more where they're teaching you something about that, like behavioral or like mindfulness or a breathing technique. So it would be like a varying, or in an art therapy group. So this varying throughout the day of some skills and some process groups. Is that essentially it?
I think we had process groups like once or twice a week, and then the rest would either be like skills groups or stuff. Yeah. Oh, and there's also a lunchtime.
Oh yeah.
Oh, but at the program I was at, so we all had individual rooms, and while we were in there, they don't have clocks. So you just like didn't know the time, and people would come around and knock on your door and be like, "Okay, it's time for lunch."
I hate that.
Yeah. Although towards the end of it, I bought a clock from Home Goods and put it in my on my desk in my room. So, but the rooms they're not like hospital rooms. Like they don't have a bed or anything. It's just like a desk in a small space.
So a space for you to do more of the working on, in your case, like exposures or things like that. And they do ask people, like they kind of collect people's cell phones, right? So that people are not, because especially for a lot of teens, and we see this in you guys have both been participants in groups that I've run, a lot of people, even if they're trying to listen, they like to be multitasking and they like to be on their phones as a way of like a self-protection strategy.
That's one question for me. You saw me earlier, we were talking and I was like playing a game on my phone because I can't just like I have to be doing something with my hands. Like I'm listening. I promise. I'm not trying to be rude.
So, but before you guys tried a PHP, what anxieties, what fears did you have, or like skepticism did you have about it before going in for the first time? So, for a person who might be like considering, hey, should I do a PHP? What were some of the things that you were thinking? Oh God! And then what was surprising to you about the PHP experience? Actually,
I feel like I was one of the first people, like in my grade, I guess, to go to a PHP program because it was in 7th grade. And I just like, I don't know, I don't know anyone at the time who went to one. So I feel like the hardest thing for me was being so young
Hmm.
because it was the problem with a lot of the programs is it's literally like 13 to 25 is
Hmm.
like
There
half the
was
time the ages.
there was a 10-year-old in mine.
Exactly. And when I was hospitalized, there was like 3 6-year-olds. So it's like it's hard to like relate to someone who is either so young compared to you or so much older than you, because like, and they look at you very differently. Like I'm older. If I saw a 13-year-old, I would be like, I don't know, I would be like a little like different. Like the level of maturity is so different, and the level of like how you're struggling definitely changes as you mature, because it's like
And the struggles.
exactly, because I feel like it becomes a lot less like internalized. Like you're not as much like, oh my gosh, like when you're 13, like it's all about you, like how bad you feel. And then once you kind of get some of that validation and like help, like it becomes way more about like the actual issues at hand, I guess.
Hmm.
Don't mind me, I'm just
Eating some
eating some dried
and you can
apricots.
move. Oh, and then Stanley.
That's right. We have also Stanley is with us, who is another furry friend. And again, we on the Not Allowed to Die podcast, we welcome all of our furry friends to give their input. So Stanley felt like he needed to jump in at that section.
Mhm.
So again, that fear, I know for a lot of people, they're just concerned about, I don't know, what's going to be weird to open up to all these strangers.
Yeah.
And so is that once you get into it and you're doing groups with people, is it actually somewhat easier to open up to a bunch of strangers?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I will, I mean, for example, like once I got to high school, like freshman year, which is, I feel like you're like a baby. Like I was still talking, and Megler runs a couple groups. I was still talking all the time just because I was like, once you leave, like you kind of don't think, you're so in your head all the time. Like no one thinks about the issues that other people are facing most of the time.
Yeah.
Like it is like sad, but it's kind of true. Just like it's hard to get out of your brain.
And like not in a rude way. It's just like you have so much going on that
Mhm.
you like can't really focus on anybody else.
So it feels safer than like, so if people are concerned about doing groups or they haven't been group people, do they force you to talk in the groups like sometimes, or are they just like, hey, like if you really want to make progress, like do they encourage it? So how does that look? So for a person who's like, I don't know if groups are my jam, like I'm just not sure if that's going to be something that's going to work for me, like what would make a person decide, hey, just my individual therapy isn't enough, I need a PHP or I need something more? Like what would go into that calculus in your mind of like when to decide I should be thinking about a PHP or an IOP or something?
Okay, wait, that was like 3 questions.
Yeah, I was
in
gonna
one.
say.
Can you bring
I
it
love,
up?
I love, I love rapid firing you in that way. And so,
For the first
You
one,
know I can't process that all at once.
wait, hold on. I already like forgot.
What was the first question? Sorry. We're the
well, so let's
worst.
just go with if you're working with so the first question is, do they make you talk
Oh,
about things in groups?
Not at all.
so I actually had 2 or 3 people in my group out of 8 that didn't talk. I'm pretty I don't want to say they were selectively mute, but like the chances of them being selectively mute were pretty high, considering that I was in an anxiety group.
Mhm.
And they never forced them to talk. They communicated with like motions and head nods sometimes.
Mhm.
They spoke a little bit when they felt more comfortable, but they don't make you talk.
And for me, when in 7th grade, I was like, did not want any help, and I was like kind of forced into the program, and I probably like didn't say a word to anyone. And then once,
I didn't
and
talk at
they
first
were like
either.
very encouraging, but I feel like sometimes like you can get a lot out of just listening to how like what the advice other people get, essentially. Like
Yeah.
everything is applicable in like some type of way. Like even if like you don't have a drug addiction, like you not me about to say now.
You're going on.
But like you can always get something away from just like coping strategies and just like, I don't know, like perspectives, I guess. And also it's really nice to know like you're not alone.
Mhm.
And that there are therapy for like people are there to listen if you want to talk. Like you don't have to talk, but like
Yeah.
if tomorrow you decide you do, okay.
Stanley.
So
All right, so we lost our guests for a second because Stanley stepped on the computer, but now they're back. So Stanley just he feels uncomfortable with oversharing about mental health information. But one of the things note is that, and we're saying that we can learn a lot from other people's experiences from groups, and that's one of the things I really love about group therapy. And I think a lot of people are intimidated to go into a situation where they're saying all these other people are going to know this thing about me. But the nice thing when you're in a PHP, that's already out there. Like, we're clearly all already struggling, or we wouldn't be here.
So like,
Yeah, so there's no embarrassment about that issue and that part of it. Now the question though is, so when you're there and you're making these bonds and connections, now most of the partial hospitalization programs discourage people from making friendships.
oh, it's so sad.
It's so
Yeah.
I have to say, in my second IOP, I did illegally make friends, and I'm still in contact with like 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. And I think that's, I understand from the perspective of the programs, they are thinking, hey, we're putting people seek people naturally at their same level of emotional health.
Yeah.
But they just don't want to be responsible if one of these people has a relapse or if they become suicidal, that they're not trying to actively encourage that. That being said, I think the programs realize that it's going to happen.
Mhm.
So they don't crack down, but they discourage people from making connections outside of the groups and whatnot so that you can keep your treatment and your life a little bit separate. But I do think, so I understand the logic of it. So it's done. Most people do make connections that maintain and last beyond just their time in treatment and program from what I've seen. So any
Mhm.
other thoughts on that?
I will say, I feel like from all the people I've met, like, you stay in touch, but you don't talk as much as like a normal friendship. Like, you don't see each other enough to kind of get to know them on that level, because when you're there for yourself. You're not really thinking of how other people are getting better, I guess. So I felt like I still have like Snapchats and Instagrams of a couple of the people I've met, but we've never really like hung out more than once, or I don't know. I just felt like you kind of like grow up together, but like separately still. You just like kind of want to know, like remember that kind of part of your life, I guess.
I still hang out with some of them actually. I was Snapchatting with one of them yesterday. We were sending pictures of each of us crying at the same time. We were like, "Hey, we're both sad."
Well, I think that's a good also part to come to. So how will we define success after a PHP? And I think this is a big misconception, particularly from parents, is not when I'm done with the PHP, my problems are going to be fixed and I'm just going to be better.
We talked about this last night.
We
Yeah.
did.
So tell me, like, how should people view, like, what would a good, like, saying like, hey, I got what I wanted to, like, I'm not fixed, but this goes back to the question of how do we know when just individual therapy is not enough? What should a person going into PHP, what would success-ish look like after 3 weeks in a PHP?
I did 8.
I feel like motivation. Just to,
Okay.
because like the first two or three PHPs I went to, like I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to get better. I just wanted to stay in the rut I was in and like feel all the feels. And I think that's fine now that I'm out of it. And I do, and like I talked to my therapist about it, because it's hard because to help someone in that position, because like what else could you have done, essentially, was like her question. And I guess there wasn't really another option, but I do feel like you really have to want to get better when you go to a PHP, or else there's absolutely nothing's going to happen. Because like the second time I was hospitalized, they literally were like, the only person who's going to get you out of this is you. So you're going to have to do all this work. And I was like, what? Like, that's not fair. Like, I don't want to put all this effort in when I like don't want to be alive. And they were like, that's just like how it is. And that kind of like put me in just like a mindset of like, the only person who can get me better is me. And I feel like once you can get to a PHP and have that motivation and take in all the skills, you don't necessarily feel better, but you have like a lot more tools to manage your emotions that you're feeling.
Yeah, that's what I always say to people is if after if after 3 weeks you have 3 skills that you might use for life,
Mhm.
that was worth that time.
Yeah.
And 90% of what you hear and spend day to day might not be super relevant to you or might not be. So when should though a person say, yeah, like therapy is just like once a week, or even, I mean, it's very rare that you can get a good therapist to meet with you twice a week because they're usually too busy. But even if you could get therapy twice a week, so to my mind, it's like if therapy twice a week isn't enough, then we really need to be considering a PHP or an IOP. So is that what you guys would be like? How would you talk to, like, if a person was like when would you encourage a person to consider a PHP or an IOP?
Okay, so for me, I couldn't make it through a day. Like just a school day. I was having at least 2 panic attacks a day. I couldn't participate in my after school activities because panic attacks would interrupt them, and I would end up just like sitting outside with a coach who just like watched me have a panic attack. Not fun. Um, and my depression was just so high that I was like falling behind in school. I'm a very like school is my priority. I'm one of those people and I don't like it. But so for me to be falling behind and like not doing my work was very unusual. And I was getting more and more overwhelmed that I was like falling behind and I had so much to do and it just like wasn't helping. And I wasn't able to do like normal daily tasks because of my depression. And so I talked with Magler, of course, because I would spend a lot of time in his office. I literally like wouldn't go to my classes because I just couldn't. And so Magler and I talked, and we were like, yeah, something needs to change. And then I talked with my therapist, and originally she was not on board. I love her. She's incredible. But she was like, I just don't think this is what you need right now because there is some stigma around PHPs that they're only for people who are suicidal, which is not true. So then I talked with my parents, and I talked with Megler more, my therapist more, and eventually we decided I'm just going to do an intake at a PHP, see what happens. If they think if the people at the PHP think I would benefit from the PHP, then I'll do it. I'll try it, see what happens, because if you try it and you don't like it, you don't have to keep going. So I did an intake and I was recommended for a program. So I was like, you know what, I have nothing to lose and I have Stanley's barking. So I was like, I just might as well try it out. And actually, surprisingly, but also not really that surprisingly, my panic attacks stopped like a week before I went into program. And I think it was just because I knew I was going to be able to put a pause on my life. And I knew that there was going to be how did you explain it yesterday, the swimming analogy?
Oh, I said I was like PHP, so I feel like a lot of depression is like treading through water. That's how Jill described it to me. She always says
exhausting, that's
a lot.
What it is.
She says a lot of the time I know how to tread. I've done this for a really long time, but sometimes I forget how to, and it gets really hard. And I was saying I feel like PHPs are there to be a little float for a little bit, to kind of give yourself a break, I guess.
And remind you how to swim.
Exactly. And teach you how to swim again. And and it's not necessarily always swimming, but I feel like a lot of life is treading. You're kind of just getting through, we always say what is it? Now I'm forgetting.
What? What do you mean?
You're, I don't even know.
What are you trying to say?
Well, but again, this idea that it is a break and it is a timeout. And so I always like to say if sometimes if we're playing in a basketball game and we're not doing well, the timeout doesn't change the score, but it gives us a chance to breathe and look at things, and it can change the momentum and the perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think so for anybody who is feeling like they are sort of drowning, to use your metaphor, and it's not getting better, and that once a week in the therapist's office, while that might be good, it's not moving the needle quickly enough. Sometimes we should be
twice a week, I think.
Yeah. And especially if you're going twice a week, so we would look at that twice a week, that's 2 hours a week compared to what might be 30 hours. Yeah. And learning those skills. And also many PHPs have a psychiatrist on staff. In fact, I'd say the majority of them do. So if you are doing a medication change, it's really nice to be able to, because it can be really hard to get a psychiatrist appointment and you might have to wait a long time. So having the psychiatrist on staff where they can give that feedback right away of, okay, I'm making the change, now I'm working all these things together. So I think that's really crucial and helpful. Now, how about when the PHP is over? Now, sometimes we'll shift down from PHP to IOP, do the afternoons, coming back to school and things like that, back into life. But then how about like reintegrating back into your whether it's work life, school life, family life? Any tips for people who are once they finish a PHP?
Go.
Sure. Okay, I hate to say it, but it's gonna suck. It's gonna be hard. Like, there's no working around that.
Yeah.
You just have to, like, honestly be patient with yourself. You've been through a lot. You deserve to take your time. You don't have to, like, go all in right away. So just try and take it slow, go at your own pace, all that cliche stuff. Like, it's actually true.
And that's what I feel like a lot of the teachers will tell you as well, which is
Yeah.
nice, because I feel like the worst thing is like you hear like, oh my gosh, they told all my teachers. But then you realize, like, first of all, this happens to probably at least like 4 of their students a year.
Yeah.
And also, like, I don't know, it doesn't really affect them that much. So why would they care that much at the end of the day? Now
They
that I'm
just
thinking
have a
about it.
missing seat.
Yeah,
That's it.
exactly. So they just want to get you back on track so that it's not so hard for you at the end. And I feel like our school does a very good job with
We have
integrating
an incredible program.
us back into school. And then if you literally just, because I felt I was out for at least a month or two with with like a hospitalization and a PHP and an IOP stuff, but then I missed a lot of chemistry and I ended up dropping, and I needed to
You
like
were in my class.
yes, and I had to do a lot, and it was just like really brutal. So I wasn't able to continue with chemistry anymore.
Yeah, I ended up dropping physics and AP Calc.
But we both got into college, you guys.
That's right.
So we're gonna go somewhere.
Yeah, and like colleges, at least the ones that I was
Colleges is
looking
scam.
at. Okay, Natalie. But they're like really nice about stuff like that.
They're really nice. Usually, if they're smaller colleges, if you go, because
yeah, I mean, I am going.
I'm going to University of Denver, and when Roe v. Wade was overturned, they sent out like 14 emails about mental health and like all this stuff, and I just know like it's easier for a smaller college to care. It just truly is. And like when I went to orientation, they literally were like, if you guys have problems, you can like contact us every day. Like, and it's just so true. Whereas my friend who's going to Boulder, which is in the same state, which has around like 30,000 students, that you just don't have that accessibility because they have so many other students they have to help.
So now how about with regard to peers, and like if kids ask you, where were you? Like any tips on how to?
I remember what I did.
What did you do?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm eating.
No, you're good.
I shouldn't be, but
no, you need to eat. She needs to eat, guys.
Not for eating disorder reasons, health issues.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm trying. Oh, okay. So whenever I got questions like throughout, like when I was in PHP and like not in school, whenever classmates or friends or whatever would text me and be like, hey, where are you? Close friends, I would just tell them the truth. And I'm like, please don't tell anybody yet, because I want to be the one to tell them if I'm gonna. And they'd be like, okay, like you do you, that's fine. If they're good friends. And for other people who were just like acquaintances, or I like just knew they were curious and stuff or nosy, I would just say I'm taking time to take care of myself. That was like you could also blame it on, you can say like I'm having some health issues or like something's happening in the family, but like I was worried to do that because I didn't want to have to make up a whole story.
Yeah.
And
when you're stressed.
Well, I think the more that we can just tell the truth in a way that doesn't sound terribly interesting is the best way to go. So if we just say, I was in a program working on my stress, and you know, which is totally it's the least interesting portion of it, but I was a program working on my stress, and then you just ask a question, what did I miss, or how are you doing, and get people talking about themselves, then it's okay, it's not that interesting. It's when it seems like it's a secret, then people will get more curious and they want to know more things.
I agree with
honestly,
that.
like when I said I'm taking some time off to take care of myself, nobody asked me any questions after.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get.
And you kind of get the memo.
Yeah. And then they're like, okay, I hope you're like, okay, you know?
Like text me if you need me type thing.
Even though they don't mean it usually.
No, yeah, but it's fine. It's the thought that counts.
Exactly. Because like, how do you really respond to that?
No, literally. Well, I will say I was probably a little too honest all the time. Like I fully would be like, after a test, just like to my teacher, like, hey, can I go to the social worker, when I could easily just leave the room and email her later, because
I would
didn't
just walk
care
out.
what other students really thought. Because at the end of the day, like the other students didn't care either, I guess.
I feel like the teachers care more than the students.
Well,
Yeah,
I think the key is, yes, the degree to which other people are wrapped up in their own lives and how little they care about why
exactly.
you were gone. That's almost more for some people when they get back. It's like, wow, nobody
Yeah,
actually even noticed that I was gone for 3 weeks. That's
literally. That
depressing.
is, some people actually do get very sad about that, but I honestly thought it was like a great thing.
But and I think the teachers just want to make sure they're trying to figure out how much, and getting you caught up, how much they can push, and if you're walking out,
Yeah.
and they always, again, everybody is the center of their own universe. So if you're leaving, they might think, oh, is this because of me or something I did? When the vast majority of the time, it's just, no, my brain is full right now because I'm still not. I'm again, even after a PHP, and this is something that everyone needs to understand, a person is not at 100%
Oh, not
very,
even.
very frequently even after they're done. So we shouldn't be thinking that just because they're back from a PHP that they can spend 90% of class time focusing.
Yeah.
No, I feel like all PHP is like a big bin of advice, and like you got to
Mhm.
do with it. Like,
And making connections.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it was
Yeah.
really helpful for me to make connections with my peers and with the therapists.
and teachers, like it really taught me like how important it is to have those couple of teachers that you really can rely on throughout high school. Because
And Nagler.
no, that's why I'm considering him a teacher, Mr. Hain. Even though I
Yeah.
met like some of these teachers in the last couple of months of high school, like they still kept me like going. And like the reason I would even like want to go to school, I would want to tell them things. Like
Yeah.
I have friends, but it wasn't the same because like I don't know, like a teacher doesn't lie to you. They don't care about like anything really. Like they're just
Mhm.
fun people. I just think use them to your advantage. There's not always good ones, but there are a couple really good eggs.
One of the only reasons I was probably the only reason I was excited to come back to school was to see you, Magler. Because I was
No,
like, there's so
literally.
much to update him on. Like,
Magler
I
got-
haven't talked to him forever.
Magler got injured and it was brutal, you
Oh my
guys.
God. And my first full day back at school after being in a program, Magler was out for personal reasons.
That
And
was
I was
funny.
like-
that was awful. I felt so bad.
Dude, I felt so bad because I didn't know why you were gone.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, where is he? Why is he not
And
here?
she-
like, it's my first full day back. And
And
then
we
you
were
came back
looking-
and I was like, shit.
And we were literally so mean to him,
Silly.
and it was like not for good reasons. Like he was.
We love you and we forgive you.
Well, I think
Us.
again, the key though is saying making the relationships. The more we're communicating and finding these people that care about us, whether it's again, and for the people who are older and if it's in their work life or whatnot, having that helps that transition back instead of doing it.
Yeah.
Last thing I guess I want to ask about with PHPs is there anything that would be like a red flag where you would say, like, I need to get out of this one and do a different one? It's like I'm not getting my needs met at that PHP, or whether before you start, or if you're doing your research on which one to go to, or even if you're at the program, how would you say, okay, I need to pull the plug and just leave this one and do a different one?
I had to do
You have
that.
the best experience. Yeah, I feel like you have the best answer for this.
Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
So one of the major red flags in the third program I was at was the therapists just weren't paying attention to me. Like they weren't meeting my needs. I needed a lot more individual attention, and they said they were going to try and work with me on that, but they didn't really. And for some reason, I had a panic attack in every single individual session that I had with my therapist
I don't know why
there.
I'm laughing.
No, it like is kind of funny though, because like that's where you're supposed to
Feel safe.
like feel safe and talk and like update them and just like do whatever you do in therapy, you know. But I would just sit there and stare at the wall, like not being able to breathe, which kind of a red flag.
Yeah.
And also where was I going with that?
Well, just
I have a green flag.
I was gonna say
green flag. Yeah.
You go.
Art therapy, music therapy,
Yes.
any type of that like experiential therapy, they usually call it ET. Incredible. It was like always one of my favorite parts of the day. It gives you something to look forward to. Even if you're not artistic, you don't like music, like they will. It's just, yeah.
Like even if you hate slime, like you get to make slime one day. Like
Oh, it's
they
so
just
good.
try to like. I always say like sometimes in those stages, like you just need a reason to like keep you going, and like those stupid things about life, like being able to color with crayons, and like you know what it's just like small things that kind of keep you going.
Yeah. At the first
Dog
program, dog therapy, green flag. At my first program, we had an art therapist who would sort of like use art therapy to challenge our anxiety and OCD, which
Mhm.
she was like, I know you guys hate me for this, but like she would have us like do like watercolor and not let us stop until we like art therapy time was done. And then of course me being me, I was like, no, I like it the way it looks right now. And she was like, but you have to keep going. I was like, but it's pretty. And she was like, nope, keep going. Which like
I like that idea though.
no, it was nice. Yeah. And then the next time we had art therapy, she had us take pens and like doodle on it, which I hated. I was like, Miss Desi, there is no way you're gonna get me to put something on this beautiful piece of watercolor paper. And she was like, but you have to just like do something. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I loved her though. She was incredible. And she would play music and everything. It was so fun. But anyway, yeah, green flag.
Well,
You
so I
need
think, yeah, having those multiple modalities and different ways of like exploring which people might not have ever considered doing on their own, and you don't know what might work for you and might resonate with you. And as I said, again, some of it won't resonate with everybody. I'm sorry, Natalie, you were going to say something?
Oh, I said like you need to be like able to be motivated. Like they need to push you, but they also need to know like when to stop. And I feel like that's also something to look for in a program. But it's hard
Yeah.
to know.
My third program didn't know when to stop.
It's hard to know unless you're actually experiencing it, I guess.
Okay, can I say something?
Yes,
Okay.
you may.
Sorry, I don't know why I said it. Because it just reminded me of something. But okay, so when I'm in a program, I tend to need breaks throughout to either just like get like use a skill without people around or talk with somebody, take a walk, like do all that stuff. The first program I was at was incredible with that. I would say like, can I take a break? They'd be like, yeah. They'd walkie, like, can someone come for a break in this room? And then someone would come. We would go back to my individual room. They would ask me what I need. Sometimes I would start to have a panic attack, and they more than not. And they like my individual therapist there was incredible, and a lot of the times she would be able to do a break with me, and she just knew like when I was in the middle of a panic attack, I wasn't going to use any skills. Like I just had to ride it out. So she would just sit with me. Like she would literally just sit there. And then like when I started to come through, she would be like, "Do you want ice? Do you want sour candy? Like what do you want to play a card game?" We always played garbage. It was so fun.
Garbage is so fun. I learned that in the hospital.
So fun. We always play garbage. And then at my third program, they wouldn't really let me take breaks, which I needed because I was one of the oldest kids in the group and I know myself better than anybody else knows me. And so like when I say I need a break, it means that I've tried stuff I know. I need to step out, like I need to do this and blah blah blah. And they just wouldn't let me. I would be like, "Hey, can I take a break?" And they would be like, "Fill out this sheet and like do square breathing." Anybody that knows me knows I hate breathing exercises. Like I despise them. And they'd be like, just like fill out the break sheet, and then if you still need a break, maybe you can take one. Maybe. And then my therapist at that program would like shove coping skills down my throat. And she would accuse me of like refusing to use skills if I didn't want to or wasn't in a place where I could. So that's a red flag. If they don't listen to you and your needs, then not it.
Well, and I would say that that's true with individual therapy, with your psychiatrist, with anyone, or with any medical doctors. And we'll probably do another episode with our two guests here about just dealing with other medical doctors when if you're not feeling like you're being listened to, and you're not feeling like the program is responsive to you.
Mm-hmm.
We have to. This is, as Natalie was saying earlier, this is your life, your mental health. You have to take the wheel.
Yeah.
And if it's not, you have to feel comfortable being assertive. And yes, they're going to sometimes hopefully push you out of your comfort zone. But if you're not feeling like you're being listened to, then maybe it's not the right program for you.
Yeah.
And speaking up, because you're paying these people, like they work for you. So if it's not working, then it needs to change.
And then I would have some therapists like at that program be like, in the middle of a panic attack, they'd be like, "Come on, you have to go back to group. You're like wasting my time."
Yeah. So,
So,
anybody who's diminishing you and minimizing your feelings. Natalie, it seemed like you wanted to say something, or
I was just gonna say, like, based off of like what Talia said, like the biggest thing is like accommodating for everyone. I think some programs do a really good job knowing like literally every mental health journey is going to be different. Mangler probably can attest to that. He's probably never seen anyone with the same story or like the same way that they dealt with it.
yeah.
So I feel like the biggest thing is like kind of being able to be like, okay, what do you need? And then going from there instead of being like, well, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Because that's like kind of hard. And then you're also in a stage where you're like, Megler always says like the biggest side effect of depression is like, what was it, like hostility?
irritability. Yeah.
Irritability. And
Oh,
like
yes.
the way I would just like be like, okay, I'm done then. I'm not gonna do any more work because if you're not gonna listen to me, I'm not gonna be here, basically.
I was kind of really bitchy to a lot of the therapists at that program,
And
but
it sends you down a spiral. I feel like it's
exactly.
like hard.
And I hate being mean to people, and I hate when people like when I feel like people are mad at me. But then my depression and anxiety, like irritability, is one of my like top 5 symptoms probably. And so I would just feel awful, but also like not know what to do with those feelings, and I would take it out on them, which like in my head they deserved it a little bit, but like not all the time.
So again, in wrapping up, partial hospitalization programs they're not perfect. They're not a cure, but they are a form of treatment that I do think more people should be open to and consider. And particularly if you are a student, maybe as we've talked about, like if one of the hardest things is coming back to school. Look, the summertime, most people are feeling pretty good over the summer, so they don't want to delve into these issues.
Yeah.
But it can be a great time to get a lot of these to work on, learn these skills before starting your next school year. And so this is, and no one's going to ask you where you were. No one was going to do any of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate our guests and giving me their time and their expertise. This is not going to be the last time you're here. So our first interview, hopefully, I'm not going to ruin this from a technological standpoint, and all Stanley and Mariska's work is not going to go down the drain.
Literally.
But so again, if you have questions for us, again, email. Remember, please, to rate and review the podcast. Both of our guests have rated the podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Music, because we know Mariska's paws feel so much better. And
she just loves love. So we just want all the love.
She's a lovey baby, and she just, she needs that. So do whatever it takes to get you through this world. Until we talk again, remember, you are just not
allowed to die. That's going to hurt those ears.